Hello, this is Sweet June 2010. Hope everybody's doing good. I'm doing good. Um, this video I want to do a little bit of a book review. I like to read, but when I read, I like to read, um, I love to read informational books, because I love learning and I love to read informational books to learn something. And I was taking a little bit of a technology break because I realized, because I love to read, and I realized I hadn't been reading in a while. I've been spending a little bit too much time on Facebook and YouTube, and so I was like, you know what? I need to take a little bit of a technology break. So I decided to go to the library and get some books and do some reading. And I'm also doing some research. I'm doing some research possibly and thinking about getting into some home-based businesses. Doing some research about that. Anyway, I love to read informational books, and what I came across was a book by Barbara Endenwrench, and it's called "Flat Broke with Children: Women in the Age of Welfare Reform." This is a good read. Um, this book was a very very good read because basically what it's talking about, she did some research on um, this was basically during the beginning of the welfare reform period. This was the beginning of welfare reform, and when they started reforming welfare, which was in the mid 90s. And basically, what she's talking about in this book here, she's talking about um, it's a very good read. She's talking about the challenges that she did a lot of interviews. She interviewed a lot of caseworkers. She used two different cities. She gave them fictitious names, and she went down to the welfare office in those two of those cities. She interviewed caseworkers. She interviewed a lot of the clients, and the research that she gathered was really fascinating because what it basically talked about is basically talked about they were trying to reform welfare at that time, and they was trying to um, do work fair, work first type programs. Michigan has like a work first type program. This was in the beginning of that when they first started doing all that, and what they were basically trying to do was uh, telling the women that they had so much time to find work or their benefits be cut off. And so, and another thing that they were trying to do is that they were trying to give women like a 2 year to 5 year limit. Like if you were on cash assistance for 2 to 5 years, after that you would get cut off. And so, what she was basically uh, doing the research on is that she was basically talking about a lot of the obstacles and hurdles that a lot of those women with children had to go through to try to get back into the workforce and to try to attempt to get off the welfare system. She was saying that a lot of these women, now mind you, she interviewed a lot of caseworkers and she interviewed a lot of clients, a lot of women with children receiving the welfare, and she went to two different cities. Of course, she gave them fictitious names, and it was very interesting because she had a lot of different. There was a lot of different women from different walks of life, and they were all facing different challenges. They were having child care issues. She said some of them would go get jobs, and something would happen, the car would break down, or a lot of them wasn't getting reliable child care providers, so they was having issues there. A lot of them they was having transportation issues, and it just reminded me of in the early 90s of when I was in the system myself, and it just reminded me of when I had some of those same challenges. You know how I was like trying to get a job and I didn't have a car and I was trying to get to work and trying to make sure that my child was settled and get him to child care or to school. I remember some of the challenges that I had to face just so I could go to work, you know, so I can try to work. And that's what basically this book was talking about. It was talking about a lot of the hurdles and a lot of the challenges that the women had to face trying to get off the welfare system, and it was very, very, very difficult. And a lot of those women that she interviewed winded up right back down there asking for assistance because something happened. Like, you know, they lost their job for some reason because the children got sick or they couldn't find adequate child care. A lot of them was getting child care providers that wasn't good, and then they had to switch child care providers, and they was having problems in that area. A lot of them were having transportation issues. She interviewed this one mother. She was taking care of her mom. Her mom was sick, and she had to worry about that, and she had to worry about going to work. And it's basically talking about a lot of the during the welfare reform period in the mid '90s, where they was trying to reform welfare, was trying to either tell women they had so much time to get jobs or be cut off cash assistance, or they would tell them they have so many years, like 2 to 5 years, to be on the system, or they would get cut off of cash assistance. And it was just, she's basically talking about the all the obstacles that these women had to face trying to get off of the welfare system. And a lot of them that she interviewed, like I said, they winded up back down there. And she had a lot of this woman did her homework. She said she was talking about also once the women did go back into the workforce, she also talked about the difficulty it was to them to get to pull up out of poverty. That the difficulty for them to pull off of the poverty line, you know. And she was talking about how difficult that was. Like, if a woman did get a job and she was able to work steadily, how far would that raise her income above the poverty line? And so she also talked about that, and it was really interesting. It was really a good read, and I think that everybody, because a lot of people judge people on welfare, and they judge people without really knowing that people's situation. You know, everybody has a story, and they really judge people without really knowing people's situation. And this book right here, it basically tells you the situations that a lot of these women were dealing with. You know, that a lot of them were dealing with child care issues, and the emotional toll that it was taking on some of these women. Some of these women had mental health issues that they had to deal with. The different changes that they was going through emotionally and mentally, trying to go to work and trying to raise their kids and leaving their children and sometimes care of strangers, and the emotional toll that was taking on them, and the different challenges they face as far as with transportation. And those are the things that people don't think about. You know, people don't think about those things when, they just think, oh, they just need to get off welfare and need to get a job. But, sometimes it's not as simple as that. Sometimes, because like I said, it reminds me back in the 90s when I was in the system and I was trying to go to work. And, of course, I was trying to do all this before they even started this welfare reform. And, I figured, I didn't have a car. I was trying to get back and forth to work. I was trying to worry about getting my son off to child care, off to school. And it was very difficult for me. It was very, very difficult, especially when you don't have much of a support system and you don't have a lot of help, it is very difficult. And the obstacles, and then, you know, she was talking about like when the children got sick and the mothers had to call in, and sometimes they lost their job, uh, and a lot of times they winded up having to go back down into the welfare office. And so it was a very interesting read. You know, I think, like I said, a lot of people that um, I think it's a lot of people should read that, to read this book. This is a good read. You know, um, because it talks about the challenges women face trying to get off the welfare system, and not just trying to get off the welfare system, but trying to get off the poverty line. You know, because even a lot of times when the women do go back to work, they're still living below the poverty line, and that's something a lot of people don't understand. When women do go back to work, they're still living below the poverty line, because she talks a lot about that too. How the women, when they did go back to work, they wouldn't make as much money, and they were still living well below the poverty line. And so, and then she also talked about how a lot of times they try to cover child care assistance for these women, and how in some cases that was more expensive than actually giving them the welfare check. And she also talked about that too. And so the book was, oh my goodness, this book is an interesting read. It was a very good read. I just and then some of these women in here, they it was really sad, you know, to hear some of the cases of these women. Like I said, some women were dealing with mental illness, mental health. Some of them were dealing with mental health issues. Some of them were dealing with taking care of a sick relative while they was trying to support their children. And you know, like I say, it's a lot of people that judge people that's poor. A lot of people that judge people that's on welfare. They pass judgment on people that are on welfare, but they don't really, like I say, everybody has a story, and they don't really take the time to understand the obstacles and the hurdles that people have to go through to work their way off the system. And so it's very difficult. You know, I went through it myself. And so I could relate to a lot of the stuff that she was talking about in this book. And a lot of people, you know, don't understand that. There's a lot of things that people don't understand about, you know, this thing where they just need to get a job and get up off their butt and go to work. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. And she was talking about the challenges. She was talking about the challenges that the women had getting steady child support payments. And she was talking about how the women had when you go, and I mean, they got that policy here in Michigan where when you go down and you apply for welfare services and everything, assistance, when you apply for any kind of assistance, you have to tell them who the father of your child is. If you don't, you have to give up this information. If you don't, then you're not going to receive assistance. They have a policy like that here in Michigan as well. And so she talked about that too, and how some of the women wasn't hardly getting any child support. And you know, it's basically talking about all the red tape. She was like, it was like she interviewed a lot of caseworkers, and a lot of caseworkers were like boggled down with cases and cases and cases, and some of them winded up quitting because they were just so loaded down. They were just so loaded down with and it was interesting perspective to get that side, because most oftentimes we always hear about the clients in the welfare system, but we never really hear about the people that work in the welfare system. We never really hear that side of it. And so she also talked about that side, and she conducted a lot of interviews with caseworkers, and some of them winded up quitting because they were just so frustrated with the system, you know, and what the system was making them do, and the rules and everything that the system was making them enforce. And they were seeing how these women were struggling. They were seeing how these women were suffering, and it was just nothing that they could do about it. And they were so frustrated But on their end, they had to do they had a job to do, and they had to do their job. And some women some of the caseworkers just got so overwhelmed that they just quit. You know, they couldn't deal with it anymore mentally, and so it was interesting to hear that perspective of it and that side of it. So I just thought this was a really good read, and I think it's something that anybody that has any kind of like I said, the poor people get a poor rap in this country, and a lot of people say, well, and lazy, have this perception of people that are receiving assistance. They have this perception that most people that are receiving assistance are lazy, and she talks about that as well. She dispels that myth that a lot of people that are in the welfare system have held many jobs. They have had many jobs, but due to circumstances uncontrollable of their own, they had to quit or they got fired. She also talked about black women in the welfare system. You know, us black women have problems in the welfare system that's unique because we have to deal. She talked about black women dealing with racial discrimination and everything in the workplace, and how sometimes it's hard for black women to maintain a job because of that. She also talked about that. She covered. I love this woman. She covered all the bases. Barbara Endenridge. It's a good read. If you get a chance, you're at the library or a bookstore, pick it up. It's a good read. You know, she also talked about that too. And I, as a black woman, can relate to that. You know, it's a challenge being a black woman in the workforce, and you know, you go through a lot of things. You know, I had to quit 2 jobs because I had to leave 2 jobs because of racism. So, yeah, and I could definitely relate to what she was saying about that. And so she talked about the challenges that us black women have to face in the welfare system. And, I mean, I thought she did an excellent job. I thought the book was an excellent read. And I think that anybody has any kind of questions about the welfare system, well, this book was basically written. This book was basically written at the beginning of welfare reform. It was in the mid-90s when they first started the welfare reform, when they first started reforming the welfare, when they started coming out with workfare or work first programs or CAP programs where if you had let's say you got 3 kids and you have another one, that child is not going to be covered. That child's not going to receive you're not going to receive any additional assistance for that child. You know, they had programs like that. They had programs like Work First. Here in Michigan, here in Michigan, they call it Work First. Some states call it Work Fair, where you go to work and you got so much time to get a job, and if you don't get a job in that time frame, then, you know, you're going to be cut off cash assistance. And so all this stuff started in the mid-90s, 1996 to be exact. And so that's basically what she's talking about. She's conducting all these interviews and stuff during that particular time. And so it is a real good read. You know, I couldn't put it down. I love books like that. I love books that I can read and I can't put down. And like I said, I wanted to take a little bit of a technology break because I've just found out, I just realized I was spending too much time on the internet and stuff, and I wasn't doing enough reading. And, you know, because reading is like one of my favorite things that I love to do. And I love to read informational books because I love to learn. And I love learning and I love doing research. So those 2 things right there that I love to do is, you know. So I'm always in that section when I go to the library. I like to read novels and stuff. But some of the novels, I love to read novels and things like that. But some of the novels, sometimes they get a little bit, just, you know, I have to find one where they're not talking about sex so much. And so sex sells, and a lot of authors are writing about that. So, you know, I have to find one where they're not particularly talking about a lot of sex if I'm going to read a novel. But mostly, because I try to stay away from that kind of stuff. But mostly, I love reading informational books. And like I said, right now I'm trying to do some research on some internet-based businesses. So I'm kind of peeking around in the library trying to see what's going on. So I stumbled across this book, and I was like, oh, it seems like it's a good read. I'm going to read this. And so it's a very, very good book. I recommend it. I recommend that everybody read it because there's a lot of, like I said, people pass a lot of judgment on people that's in the welfare system. And if you read this book, you will get a good understanding. If you read this book here, you would get a very good understanding of the system and how the system kind of works against you sometimes. The system was kind of working against these women a lot and everything. And I know because I've been in the system myself, so I could relate to a lot to what she was talking about in this book. And the obstacles, a lot of the obstacles that those women had to face, trying to navigate the system and trying to get off the system, and it was very difficult. It was very difficult for a lot of them. You know, when they did get out there and got a job, they was dealing with minimum wage, and so they wasn't making much money to even pay rent and all that kind of stuff. And so now we're deep into welfare reform where we still have those same programs. And so this was at the beginning of it, where they first started instituting those programs, because it used to be where now maybe some states, I don't know, some states maybe don't have it. I don't know how it is from state to state, but I know here in Michigan it's like you're required to, you have so much time to get a job or you get your cash assistance cut off. And so that's how it is in Michigan. And then they send you down to a class, and you got to go put in so many applications, or you got to go to so many places. And I really didn't really go through that process because, you know, like I said, I started working before they even done all that stuff. Before they even started doing that welfare reform, I was working before that, and I just kept working and working and working and working. So by the grace of God, I was able to keep a job. So I really didn't have to really go through that process. So I really can't relate to that particular part of the process because I had always worked. You know, I started working actually before they even started that. You know, so I didn't even go through that process. So it was an interesting read. It was, you know, it's talking about the obstacles and everything that women have to face when trying to get off of welfare into work. And so I think I recommend it. Everybody reads it. You know, it's a good read because the poor and the people on the system in this country, they get judged very harshly. And so this is something definitely everybody should read. Okay, it's just a little book review that I wanted to give on here. It's a little something different. I'll probably find some more good reads. I'll let you guys know. Come on here, talk about it. Stay tuned. I got some more interesting videos coming up. Sweet June 2010.